The 2022 mixing template is now available. Last year's 2021 mixing template for Pro Tools was a huge success, thanks to all of you who downloaded it. And that's not even mentioning all the ones who downloaded the Luna template, the Pro Tools non-UAD plugin template, the mixing course, and mix consultings. And the response has been amazing. I've listened to all of you guys, the things that you love about it, the things that you were a little bit confused about it. I've taken all of that into consideration and put it into this 2022 Pro Tools mixing template. And if you ask me, I think this one is more powerful and even was able to condense everything down so that you have the ultimate mixing template foundation. You're really going to be able to take your mixing template game to the next level. And don't worry, for those of you who are non-universal audio gear and plugin users, I will have this mixing template available with no UAD plugins. So let's dive in, let's take a look and see what's different, what things have been added, what things have been cut, and how you can get the most from what I believe is the ultimate mixing template available. All right, so here we are. A lot of things are going to look familiar, but I want to go over some of those features first and then what we've taken away. So the first thing that you'll notice is that there are no audio tracks. And one of the things that I got a lot of comments about and a lot of requests for was, can you make a recording template? Yes, but I kind of went back and forth with that because my whole mixing template philosophy is to have this as your foundation, right? If you're familiar with the Luna template video, I'll leave a link to that. Even if you don't have Luna, you can still kind of get an idea of my philosophy on mixing templates through that. And what that is that I believe the key to templates in general is that you have that foundation template that you then build on. Whatever music or whatever style that you are mixing or recording, that's your thing. And if you're trying to buy or download all these templates that say this is a country template, this is a pop template, this is a rap template, this is electronic music templates, well, that can't work for everybody. I don't care who it is. If it's the most famous mix engineer of all mixing, their template isn't going to work with the song that you have and the recordings that you have. It's just not. So what you have to do, what you have to understand is this is a foundation. So this is what I would start a new project with. Let's say I am going to be mixing a rock album. And I will use this template when I get that first track, when I listen to all the tracks and I'm like, okay, now it's time to import my template. I haven't mixed a song for this client before, and so we import this template and I get it all merged with those audio tracks. So after I mix that song, I will then save that session as a template. That way, it includes the audio tracks with no actual audio clips on them. It's got all of my EQ moves, all of my routing. And so then for the next song on that same project, I will just be adding the audio clips to those audio tracks, those empty audio tracks. And then because it was recorded with the same musicians, the same room, the same equipment, those EQ moves are going to be very, very similar to what I need. I may just barely tweak them here and there just because obviously it's not the same song, but the room would be the same. So any sort of, EQ corrections that I had to make, they're already there for me. So I've saved a ton of time. I didn't have to route anything, crazy. Everything's all set up, ready for me to go. It makes the mixing experience what it's supposed to be, and that is enjoyable. We're listening to these new songs we've never heard before. We're helping the artists get to that sound that they're trying to achieve. They want it to sound as commercial as possible and radio ready as possible, things that they're used to hearing. And that's exciting for us as engineers. So if we can get to that step and that enjoyment a little bit faster, then it's just going to make the whole process even better. And that's what I mean by your foundation template. So then when, say, 6 months down the road, you get another artist that you are like, they sound a lot like that band that I mixed 6 months ago. I'm going to pull in that template. So now you're slowly building all these templates up. And when you hear about these mix engineers that all they do is template mixing and then they've got one for everything, that's because they have built these template files for years now. And so they will have something to pull from, and then they can mix, a whole album in a day and not have any ear fatigue. Not to mention sound great. So that's what I'm trying to teach here. That's what I'm trying to get across in this whole world of template mixing. So, long story, but that is why there aren't any audio tracks on here. So let's just start right here and work our way from left to right. Now, if you have been introduced to my mixing templates before, this will look very familiar to you. There's just a couple of changes. We are now just taking these 3 parallel processing tracks and going to a lead vocal group. So all of these are going to the same lead vocal group right here. Before, I was sending that to 2 other processing tracks, groups, buses, and then that was going to an overall group to control. I cut that out. It was a little bit cluttery and unnecessary, I feel. So, what this is you'll have your lead vocal sent to each of these. You'll process that with the fatso here, adding, just a little bit more weight to that. A lot of times vocals sound a little thin when we record them. And so that's just kind of beefing things up for us. The next thing we've got going on is just using the pre of this UAD 1073. Just giving it some fuzz back in there. Just a little bit of that saturation really fills out vocals. Works great. And then we are kind of heavily compressing this one, but it's clean. We've that clean sounding compression that a lot of us are familiar with the 1176 Blue Stripe here. And then we just blend these in. We're just blending in what sounds best. Most of the time, this one's going to be pulled down a little bit more than the other ones. This tends to get a little beefy sometimes, so maybe it's not as high as the clean compressor here. Now, I do have all of these kind of turned down a little bit just because when you add your lead vocal audio into these and they're all up at unity, it's going to sound extremely loud. So I've already got those set down here. So just remember, if you're not hearing things very loud, once you send them through there and you've merged your audio with this template, just remember to turn those back up and get the balance that works best for the song. Once you do that, you'll notice all of them come out of the group here. And that group is going to the mix bus. That's another thing that I've changed in this. I used to call everything stereo out. And I feel like with some of the feedback that since people as a whole are more familiar with the term mix bus, I went ahead and changed that just so there wasn't any confusion. So the lead vocal A, as you'll notice, and I'll talk about that, why it's labeled that in just a second, but this is going out of the mix bus. And also I have a send here. This is another pretty big change that I've made. And I've got that on a send going to one of our parallels right here that we've calibrated. If you're not familiar, I've got 4 parallel compression buses here that are calibrated. And what I mean by that is I have calibrated them so that I know how much return level is going back into the overall mix. And I'll go a little bit more in depth on that a little later in this video. So I've got that on a send. Before, with the old template, I was using multiple outs. I think a lot of people were really intrigued by that. I think a lot of people were excited to learn something new that didn't know about the multiple outs. However, I think that I can get to that level, as I'm saying, so if I'm getting a certain amount of return level back to the overall mix, that's because I'm hitting certain things where I want to hit them, and I feel like I can achieve that just a little bit better, a little bit more precise using the send instead of everything being sent out basically post fader, because that's what it was going to be when you're using multiple outs. The output was going to be the same as your main fader on your track. So that's probably one of the biggest changes. Another thing that I have added, like I said, this says lead vocal A, and that's because I have added 2 lead vocals. So in case you just have 2 lead vocals, like it's a group thing. I recently mixed a project that kind of has 3 of them that kind of working as one lead vocal. So for that, I have set up here also another parallel processing, all 3 of them, which will be these right here: Vocal Crush 2, Vocal Buzz 2, and Vocal Claim 2. So you have 2 sets of these and 2 sets of these, which will be lead vocal LVB. And they're just over here, hidden and inactive. So when you need to activate those, when you have 2 lead vocals, you'll just go ahead and do that. And it's all routed, ready for you to go. So moving on, as a whole, here are all of the group tracks. These are all of the buses, all of the groups. So all of your drums will go here. Now, once we get into kind of showing how I merged this with audio tracks, we'll go a little bit more in depth on that. But this is just a basic overview. And so just some basic things. You know, we've got drums, bass, acoustic guitars. I've got 3 different electric guitars here. So if you had just a couple and maybe a lead, you know, you've got those set up. We've got keys for piano or organ or anything like that. Strings, horns, pads, synths, effects. Went ahead and added all those because a lot of that's getting used today. And I went ahead and set up 2 different background vocal groups. Now we'll just work our way up to the top here. Every one of these groups has a chamber send, and that chamber send is down here. And I'm using the Capital Chambers from Universal Audio because I absolutely love it. Love it. It always works. And I just find adding a little bit, I'm talking a little bit, like little bits like this, all the way down the line. I just feel like it just adds things, it glues everything together, it makes it feel like it's all working in the same room, and just has that added glue. I don't know what else word to say. I know that term gets used a lot and maybe a little bit abused, but that's what it does. It really connects everything. Also on the drums, I've got this other send going down here. This is what I'm calling taste, and that's just a little bit of, it's compression, but it's saturation. It's just a little bit of distort, a little bit of trash pulled back in. And like I've said before in other videos, I love this Plugin Alliance Acme Opticom. It's got that trashy sound without sounding too trashy. There's a lot of plugins out there that I think just add too much saturation, distortion, and it really just kind of, I don't know, that trash that makes me feel like real trash that I want to throw away. But this trash sounds great. Moving on up, I have the 1176 here as inactive because I do use a lot of UAD plugins, and as we know, those build up a lot of DSP. And if I'm not necessarily using something as my go-to, then I'll go ahead and have that inactive so that we're not overloading anything. And I've really been liking the distressor on drums here lately, as well as the bass here. I'll go ahead and talk about that. And moving on up to the first row here, everything has a fab filter. Now, if you have the fab filter, I've already got this set up in natural phase because that's the only one you should be using. So we've got some tweaks, you know. I like to think of it as when I get audio tracks to mix, that you have done the processing. You have gotten the sound that you want, and I'm just trying to put them all together so that they sound as commercial as possible, that they work the best for commercial listening, for our listening pleasure, whether they work on these monitors, these earbuds, AirPods, all of that stuff. That's my job, to blend that all together and make it work. Your job as an artist or whoever's recording you is to capture the sound that you already want. So a lot of these plugins, especially the EQ, I'm not using something that's altering that sound, and I'm not trying to alter that sound. I'm just trying to put all these pieces together to make them work the best way possible together so that everything sounds like what you're familiar with. And so I'm using those clean EQs from FabFilter. The Pro Q3 is great. It's got dynamic EQs. We've got mid-side. It's just the Swiss Army knife of EQs, in my opinion. Now for guitars, I do like to use these APIs. They're great. They're already set with EQ points that I like to use, and that's what I have these set for you. Now, sometimes I just like the way that these sound better. Other times we've got the SSL style here, already set with points that I like to use. Sometimes we don't need all this analog noise in there. Sometimes it kind of works. So I just go ahead and leave it in there, but if it's a little too much for you, just take it back. Next, on the guitars here, I've just got a couple of things that tend to work a lot of the times if I am compressing guitars at all. Like I said, I like it when people kind of get that sound going already, and that controlled sound, that desired sound. But if not, and I need to do a little bit of compression for the acoustic guitars, I've got the CLA 2A. I'm not using the universal audio ones here. Can't say that I use them every time. To save a little bit of that DSP power, I've just got the Waves version on here. Same thing with the electric guitars, the CLA 3A. And they're in bypass because I kind of just want to be able to control the volume on these things. So that's why we've got an L2. Everything has got a 0.5 ceiling. I wouldn't imagine having any guitars going up that high, but they're just there just in case. Just a little bit of a safety net. Just pulling up the dynamics. I want to be able to level out the sound that's already there, not trying to, have any sort of crazy compression on that. Moving on, pretty much the rest of the instruments here, I've got an L2 on there for the same exact purpose. And also, our Swiss Army knife EQ, the Pro Q3, for same purposes also. On to the background vocals, both of these identical. We've got the 1176 Blue Stripe because I just love those on vocals. It's on the lead vocal. And some EQ here. Now, on the lead vocal group, I've also got that EQ. I've also got the RVox because I love this plugin. It's one of my favorite Waves plugins of all times. I feel like this is a secret key to pushing your vocal front and center without it sounding too loud. It's just filling up that space. You don't want something to sit too far back, but if you just turn the volume up, this doesn't sound right. This is basically filling up all of that area. And then you can also control it from flying away and sounding too loud. The other plugin that I have on there is the Fairchild. I just love it on vocals. I think that after you do the RVox, this on top of it, not doing a whole lot, but a little bit goes a long way, and it just gives you that, it just tucks everything in nice. It doesn't seem like the vocal's flying away anywhere. It's just that nice round finish polish on the vocal and lets it sit right in that pocket that it needs to be. Next, we've got all of our parallel buses here. Now, this is one of my favorite sections because I feel like once you merge your audio into this, you are way more than halfway there. First couple of ones we've got here, I'm using for a kick and snare. This Transient Designer 1 is going to be for my kick, and the Transient Designer 2 is going to be for my snare. And I'll have those on sends to those. We've got the SPL. This is the Transient Designer. If I need a little bit more poke through, that's what I'm going to have on there. And then I just feel like putting a distressor on there just brings it to what you want. It controls it so much better when you add one of these on here. And I don't really have a specific setting for this. This is the default setting, I believe. And you're just kind of tweaking it, how it's going to work with the sound that you're going for, the certain point that you're going for, or if you're trying to, put some more sustain on there. You're just controlling the sound that you're trying to achieve with the distressor. Now I've got a bass compressor here with a distressor. Again, this is just set to 4:1. I've got it linked. I think it sounds better with the linked button engaged than with not. And I'm just blending that back into the bass. The bass track probably will have some sort of a compressor on there already, but I think that just blending this up underneath it just kind of fills everything out. I mean, parallel compression, that's what it's supposed to do. It works great. I've got a bass sub here. So if I'm lacking a little bit of that, just kind of filling out those really like, you know, low fundamentals, then I've got the R bass on here. I've set it to 90 because I think it just sounds best there. I think anything below 80 is gonna get just kind of too junky down there anyways. So set that kind of high, and when you blend it in, it really fills everything out. And we've already talked about the taste mic here. This is something that will go on the drums 97% of the time. If something else needs it, a guitar or something, maybe. Who knows? Maybe even a vocal. If you're being asked to add some sounds and a little bit more on the production end, then that might be something to consider. Now here we go. The last four here are our parallel processing tracks that have been calibrated. And the way that is that the drum bus, the drum crush, and the music bus are all adding back in 1 dB to the overall mix. That's how much volume is being added back, that's being returned back in after the processing that goes on these plugins. Now, the goal here is to get around 3 to 4 dBs worth of compression. These are specific settings, so if you want to take a screenshot of that, you can, or just refer back to this video. I'll have everything outlined in the chapters in the description there that you can click back and forth through to skip around. Here's a take a look at the fatso. Now this one kind of changes from time to time, but I really want a lot of compression happening here. Now I do have all of these engaged. That is one thing that stays the same. Sometimes this goes between 4 and 5, you know, just depending on kind of what it sounds like. Is 5 too much? Then we'll go back to 4. Actually, you have to circulate through all of those. Music bus, same exact setting as this one. Same. And the vocal bus here. Now the vocal bus is a little bit different. It's adding back in 2 dBs worth of gain. And this is just on a transparent vocal setting. This gets tweaked a little bit. I'm not really trying to look for anything over 5 here. So it's not heavily compressing. It's just, again, it's blending that sound back in just to fill everything up with, you know, volume and just, you know, having that vocal not sound thin, because I think a lot of mixes, or a lot of times people, they want to add a whole bunch of plugins directly on the vocal track or directly on the group that you have the vocal going to. And it just, I don't know, when you keep processing things in series like that, things just get thin, and people, you know, forget about parallel processing so much. And I'm like, you know, if you keep adding all that processing to one thing, you're going to kill it. And that's why it sounds thin a lot, or just loud. So we're just adding back in 2 dBs of overall gain back to the overall mix after our parallel processing on the vocal there. Let's take that out and make sure I'm pre-fader. So let's go back down to 5. And you can do that. I'm not really worried about, I want to be able to control the level separately. We're at 5 again, and we want to bring back in 1 dB. So there you go. Let's put this in pre-fader and go up to 1 dB, which is at 4. Maybe a little past. So there you go, right? And, you know, since it's the exact same thing that I'm looking for from the drum bus to the music bus, I'm just going to cheat and put it to what it says. So now the last one here, I can go ahead and move these The last one here is the vocal bus. I've got that set. And let's take a look. Let's keep this here. So that's pretty good. It's kind of where I want it. With the transparent vocal preset, works great. So now let's add back in 2 dBs because the vocal bus gets 2. So we're going to stop when it hits the 3. There you go. So that is how you calibrate your parallel buses here. And I've got them labeled down here for you so that you don't forget how much to add back. And I mean, you can write these down. Sometimes things change though, because, you know, if you think maybe you need a little bit more compression, or if it's not hitting quite exactly what I have, like it's not going to be the exact every time, but this will get you started if you have these plugins and you leave them at these settings. Next to that, I've got my drum verb, and this verb is actually being sent back to the drum group because I want to process that together. I want that one as one sound. I don't want the verb to just kind of sound like it's heading off to space. And I'm usually just sending the snare to that. Just depends. Maybe we send some toms there, but it's just individual elements being sent to that verb and being sent back to the drum group that's then being sent to the mix bus. And I've got the Valhalla vintage verb on that. I think the default setting of concert hall is a good place to start. I like the darkness of the 70s here, and I've just got these turned off. I don't really care too much for those. And, you know, we've got our filter. I've already mentioned the capital chamber track here. Just everything's being sent there. That's our connector. That's our glue. Now the rest of the tracks here are just our effects. These are our delays. I've got a slap here. You know me. I love Sun Studio. And so this is between that 100, 110, 15, and I'm getting that slap echo. I've got compressors on here that is keyed by the lead vocal because most of these effects tracks are going to go on the lead vocal or even the background vocals. So I've got a compressor there that's got the lead vocal as all of the keys because if I just want a little bit of that effect and maybe not so much with the vocal surrounding or with the effect surrounding the vocal, I can trigger the compressor to compress the effect with the lead vocal so that it is then released at the end of the phrases. And if you're not familiar with that, it's just a technique called ducking, but it works very well. And then the rest of those, echo tape for the Echo Boy. I've got Valhalla, the Supermassive, the Valhalla delay here. I think it's set in tape because that's what I have that labeled as. We've got plates, Abbey Road, or the Universal Audio EMT 140. I've got the stock Pro Tools Spring Reverb. Got another capital chamber here, and then here we go in mono, a mono verb. Sometimes that sounds really good on vocals. And I'm just using the old Pro Tools D verb there. Go through the settings, see what works for you. I just like to have a mono verb, ready to go. I've got the Ozone Imager here, just to widen things up if need be. And I've got a double track here using the micro shift because gotta have one of those. I have been finding that this works really cool on bass, just a little bit. Kind of fills everything out if it's too plucky sounding. And then I've got basically like my guitar pedal effects. And I've got Amplitude 4 there, and then also the Sound Toys effects rack. So we can kind of make up some sounds if we need to and add a little bit more production on this if something was just recorded just a little too plain, a little too flat, and the rest of the song just, needs the guitars to give it a little bit more. Then we've got that. And you don't even have to limit yourself to just guitars with this. You can add it to anything you want. Now in our last section here, with our mix bus and our monitoring and our print tracks, The first track you see here is just a master fader. It's the master fader for the input of the mix bus. So if I pull this down, it's pulling down everything that's going into the mix bus. And so if it's hitting just a little bit too hot, then I can pull it down just a little bit, you know? And I just have some metering plugins on there just to check levels. Now on the mix bus, you can see here, these are pretty standard for me. This is a pretty standard thing that doesn't get changed a whole lot. You know, if I am mixing in Pro Tools, I'm going to have the NLS bus on here, and I'm just going to be toggling through the different ones here. Spike, SSL, the mic is, I believe, EMI console, and then the Nevo is the Neve. Got your pull tech. I've got my filters with the Bax Dangerous EQ, and you've seen me talk about this one. If I'm doing any sort of mid-side EQing, clean things up a little bit before sending that to mastering, this is a wonderful plugin. And just for backup purposes, I can do kind of the same thing with the Pro Q3, set in natural phase. The Magi Q4, you've heard me talk about that. I love to add that 40K air back in. My favorite bus compressor, the API 2500, and I have to have this on my mix bus from now on. I love it. I usually start here. These are my settings. These are my start. Sometimes I will actually tweak the bias just a little bit, see where that opens up a little. You know, go ahead and try that out. Try moving that around a little bit. And I am looking for around here. I'm looking to hit around here. That is my sweet spot. And then, of course, just your Oxford limiter, you know, and just kind of controlling the whole thing, making sure that we're not going overboard. And it adds a little bit of something. I love this plugin. I love the enhance curve. I don't have it set very high. A little bit goes a long way. Now, next to that, we have basically the master for the print track. And I know this may look a little bit backwards. That's just kind of how I have them set up. But I'm not doing anything with this fader. This fader will not move because I want this to reflect what this is. Because what's coming out of here is the overall level sound that I want. And I want to be able to monitor that with these plugins, with these level monitoring plugins, and my tonal balance and my insight. So I want to know what my peak levels are at, you know, for what is being printed. And that's what these are. So if I need to print something that's a little bit louder for my client to listen to in their car, and so that they can have something to compare to, say, you know, a master or something that they're used to hearing on streaming devices or a CD, then I will increase the level here and print that, but it's in mute so that I can just monitor this one. And so when I'm ready to print, I'll just hit, you know, record on both of these. If I need to make it a little bit louder, make those adjustments. And then I've got two separate prints. I've got one that's going to be the master, that's going to master, and then one for the artist to listen to. And that is pretty much it. That is an overview of the 2022 mixing template for Pro Tools. This has some Universal Audio plugins in there, but I do have a version, a non-UAD template that you can also download if you so desire. All the links to these templates will be in the description below, which will lead you to my website at fairairmusic.com. Check out all of the brand new templates there, and the first time for Studio One. It's this exact same template that has been designed specifically for Studio One. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you'd like to help the channel out further, please hit the like button, subscribe to this channel. It allows me to continue to put out new material, new content, and as this whole thing keeps evolving, we can continue to learn and progress as mix engineers ourselves. So thanks so much for watching, y'all, and we'll talk soon.